It's spring brush fire season in Connecticut. We talk with CT Deep's Division of Forestry about their forest management program and why they're planning on burning over 100 acres of forest. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Despite the rainy weather we've been having lately, spring is here, and so is the risk of brush fires in the state. With leaf litter everywhere and other combustible materials, once the weather brightens up and dries everything out, the chances for brush fires to occur also increases. I caught up with Tom Trask, Forest Protection Supervisor with Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's Division of Forestry, to find out more about the spring brush fire season here in the state and why his department also intends to deliberately burn over 100 acres of state forest land in eastern Connecticut and part of Hartford County during April. A lot of concern at the moment for what is being called the spring brush fire season. It's probably something that people don't even think about. Talk to us about why it's a concern, Tom.
So in the springtime, the big concern is that there is a transition phase where we go from no snow on the ground to no leaves on the trees as well. So what happens is that the forest and all the 1 hour fuels, which is generally like the twigs, the leaves, the grass, they tend to warm up and dry out quickly, and they can cause a fire to spread quickly as well and communicate to other larger hour fuels, which will create and cause more work, which would see the fires to extend longer in time.
Connecticut obviously has a lot of forests and wooded areas. I suppose the point to make to people is we may not be California, but it's actually probably more dangerous for us here than it is for the larger states because we have urban areas closer to wooded areas. Would that be correct?
I think it's a juggle where statewide we're all really suffering from this. I can't say we're worse or better than any others. Just look at what happened out in California this past month. They lost basically entire neighborhoods. The potential is absolutely there where we could lose several neighborhoods. I know just from reports coming in through fire departments that houses are being affected. The fires are starting outside and then burning to the house. Thankfully, fire departments have been able to save those houses. But if we have a drying period, which right now, thankfully, we're in a low fire danger with the weather and rain we've had. But if we do get that drying period that causes high fire dangers and drought, the potential is absolutely there. And we're so small and compact in Connecticut that it could start a mile away and run to a neighborhood and start that neighborhood on fire. But the fire departments and deep staff are very active in creating those break lines, bringing in dozers if we need to, like you saw last fall. We were very proactive and kept our fires extremely small, and we want to continue moving that forward.
Let's just talk a little bit about obviously last year, because like you said, despite all of the great actions taken by people like yourself and the staff and other firefighters, we still had some situations across the state where fires were burning for at least a week. Talk to us about what typically causes these. I know it seems an obvious question. What causes a fire to start?
So their majority of them is documented as human causes. A lot of times they come in as undetermined because we can't find a specific source, but it could be from someone flicking a cigarette, cigar, ashes from a fireplace not properly fully extinguished, a campfire not properly fully extinguished. Lightning strikes are a big one. We haven't had any of those yet this year, but as well, we have had down power lines start due to the wind and the trees breaking, causing that issue. It's a broad category, but again, mostly human starts, really those unextinguished campfires and cigarettes. Along a road there, you'll see them get started by a cigarette because it dries out quick of being open. And cars going by continue to have that cigarette stay lit. Cigarettes do have safeties in them to, if they're sitting somewhere, they are supposed to go out, but with that continued wind driving by them, it just doesn't happen.
Give us a sense as well, if you would, of some of the figures of the amount of fires, etc., that occurred last year, because it was significant. And again, I don't think people in the state realize exactly how many wildfires you and firefighters dealt with last year.
So last year we dealt with 605 fires in total. Unfortunately, we don't always get all the fires in. We are reaching out to have that information come in. And what happened last year really is within that 1 month period, we had half of that reported into us and we had to respond to. So resources, not only locally, but statewide and deep, were stretched so thin that we had to bring in those resources to create that statewide incident and respond appropriately. The other issue is that the leaves fell off and stayed on the trees later. So anytime we thought we had a fire out, the leaves would fall back over and it would look like there was never a fire there, but then it would start up again a day or two later due to a hot spot. I don't have the percentages in front of me right now, but human cause, again, was the majority of what started them.
And also, there was a lot of acreage burned as well. Again, I don't want to keep like going back to California. It's obviously a very different situation, but again, still for Connecticut, I believe it's somewhere in the region of about 510 acres burned, which again seems a fairly significant amount of land.
Correct. It is. What we were seeing more is that the fires were occurring in wildland urban interface areas. So that number compared to that is significant to be having in that type of area. With that being said, in previous years, we have had 500-acre fires start in remote areas. I believe it was in the Northwest, and they didn't really go noticed or publicized, but those alone were 500 acres. So considerably acreage wise in relation to the state, not huge, but in relation to the urban interface that we have to deal with, definitely a significant issue.
As the weather continues to warm up and the trees will obviously eventually leaf, so hopefully that helps to counter the situation a little bit. But we're still talking about, as you said earlier, humans unfortunately causing these. We're going to be entering grilling season as well in the backyard or in our state parks. Again, something for people to be aware of when they're doing that.
Yes, absolutely. Grilling is a big one. Thankfully, propane is a generally safe item to burn with. Obviously, it's always recommended that you're burning in a safe area that doesn't have leaves or up against the porch because you don't want to start your house on fire. The charcoal grills are the bigger issue. People sometimes dispose of their ashes and they're not fully extinguished. We want to remind everybody, obviously, to make sure they're dead cold. It's you don't want to drown the fire. They're completely out. And if you're cooking over a campfire, it's the same concept. Make sure it's drowned. Have your hand waving over the back of it, the top of it, to see if it is cold. If it's not, add more water, stir it around with a shovel or another tool. Make sure those fires are completely out. And that will help us not have to stretch our resources so thin. I currently only have 4 fire control officers and seasonals. Thankfully, park staff are very active with us as well, and the foresters that we work with at Deep as a whole, we all work very well together, but we all also have a lot of programs we're working on. So essentially, it's 4 to 5, including myself, that would be responding to these fire assists.
And also, we should, of course, mention fire pits. People have fire pits as well. That's another one which can be very dangerous if left unattended.
Yeah, so obviously, again, make sure your fire pits are completely extinguished. Follow local burn rules and regulations. If the local warden says there's no burning for any reason, don't burn. On high fire danger days in general, all fires are not supposed to be occurring. There is a ban as soon as we hit a high fire danger day, which seems to happen a lot now in Connecticut, a lot of high fire danger days. So again, if you have any questions or concerns, make sure to reach out to your local fire department, the local warden, or at the end of the day, Deep. We're more than happy if as long as someone's in the office to be able to answer those questions and make sure it's being done safely.
I'm just picking up on your comment that we're having more of these sort of 5 days. Climate change, of course, clearly very evident then in the way that these things are not only just starting, but maybe starting earlier.
So I think we're definitely going to see an earlier trend. A big item that we have to deal with too is a lot of diseased and insect trees that are dying. That's creating more fuel for these fires in larger areas as well. So climate change as a whole, I'm not a climate scientist by any means, but absolutely, we are going to see probably longer seasons, earlier seasons. I think we're going to go back and forth. I have been watching and reading a lot on this, and there's predictions of having the drought, a micro drought all of a sudden occurring, as well as flooding occurring as well. And it sounds based off of what people are saying that are a lot smarter than me, that it's going to be a trend going back and forth where we'll see what we saw last year. 1 month we were flooded out on the side of the state, and the next month we were burning in the state. And I think that's going to be a constant trend just based off of weather patterns that we're seeing.
And I suppose, again, another point to make for listeners is even if we have had a few days of rain, which of course we've had recently, doesn't necessarily greatly or may not greatly reduce the chances of fire starting because it may have only just touched the top tier and there's still a lot of dry stuff underneath. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. And Connecticut seems to always have a windy day every day, whether it's light or not, coming from the ocean there. And the 1 hour fuels again are constantly drying, and those will dry out quickly and start that fire, and then get into those deeper fuels that will cause longer duration fires and more work for fire crews and firefighters to have to contain and extinguish them fully. We do a lot of good burning in the state of Connecticut, which is great. We do prescribed burning, which helps eliminate a lot of those fuels, especially on state properties. And then if we do get to a fire where we're able to back burn, it may cause the fire to get larger, but it contains it quicker and we can put it more in a patrol status this time of year when things happen. We look at long-term models of basically how much rain or moisture we have received in the past few months, and that also bases our decisions on what the high fire danger is or probability of ignition for that day. Again, thankfully, right now it's a low on both of those spectrums because of the amount of rain we have. But we'll see what happens with that. Again, yeah, like you said, definitely an item to remember and stay safe with, of not burning right away, and be conscious that the rain isn't going to contain all the fires all the time.
And just going back to your comment about backburning as well, again, I think people may not understand precisely what that is, but it is a controlled thing that you do under very careful circumstances. And it's done specifically to create, I believe, it's like barriers so that in the event that a fire comes along, there are more of these breaks to try and either slow or stop a bigger blaze happening. Is that correct?
Correct. When we backburn in relation to an actual wildfire occurring, we assess the situation as quick as we can, safely and effectively, and we do what's called big boxing. So we find roads that we can anchor off with, or fields that we can burn off quickly, or dig line to, dozer line, and we burn from there back towards the fire that's coming towards us. Again, it will cause the fire generally to double, sometimes triple in size, but it's a quick back burn to contain it, like you said, in stopping and creating more barriers and removing that quick dried 1 hour fuel from the dangerous fire occurring, burning forward. A prescribed burn is one that we see. I believe Massachusetts just recently had a prescribed burn, went well. They had a little slop over, so they did contain it quickly. Nothing was damaged property wise, as far as I know. And in relation to prescribed burning, we have basically a whole sheet or a whole packet that says we can burn on this day with this weather. The conditions must be here, the wind must be doing this, and we'll burn within that. And if at any point in time it gets out of prescription, we stop the burn and contain the fire within a small one, even if we haven't burned the whole unit. Obviously, there's always risks with fire, and we assess all of them by creating those large fire barriers with dozers and line. And some of it's just wet line. We may mow grass low in areas and bring in water from a local river, lake, on tankers or tenders, and water down that and maintain it within that area, and then use black line and wet line together to remove those fuels. And what prescribed burning is essentially removing those fuels so we don't have everything built up to cause these larger wildfires that we saw, such as Hawthorne.
Tom, in April, Deep is going to conduct prescribed burns at 6 locations, 5 of them in Eastern Connecticut and one in Hartford County.
Correct. Some of the prescribed burning is actually there to implement and get rid of invasive species to allow other species to grow. The goal is not to go extremely deep or nuke the area, as you'll see during generally wildfires instead of prescribed burning. This breaks down an area, creates charcoal, and essentially changes the chemical compound of the soil to help produce better material for seeds to grow in once they're dropped from the trees or other plants that we're looking to grow.
And in turn, I'm guessing that can help out, obviously, the general habitat as well, so birds, etc., and the wildlife.
Correct. Once the burning occurs through there, it increases a lot of grass for deer and other species. It may improve certain trees, and blueberries, for instance, actually really love burning. When you can burn a blueberry field when it's raining out, and by the next season, you'll almost double the crop for that, which will help in turn wildlife species.
As we said, there's 6 areas. One of them is a very big area. It's the Suffield Wildlife Management Area in Suffield in Hertford County. That's going to be almost 70 acres. Just talk to us about how do you carry out a burn, and obviously how do you control it as well? I know you said it's not a wildfire, but still it's fire at the end of the day.
What a lot of it is, we do a lot of prep work. Thanks to the wildlife management experts that generally create these plans, they get folks together, equipment together. And while we burn from those sections, we follow with water sources, usually on a Type 6 engine, which is a smaller truck style, or a Type 7, which would be a UTV with a small tank on it. And we extinguish it as it burns. So we have crews monitoring beyond those. And as the engine comes through and extinguishes what the burners are creating as the black line, they're wet lining it and generally extinguishing it within 5 to 10 feet in from where the mold line is. It's a very complicated process, but it works very well in this area.
And this is all part of what is generally termed as like forest management. It's just basically some housekeeping, trying to keep things like, as you said at the top of this interview, obviously to remove the fuels that could potentially start a spring fire, but it's basically housekeeping.
The objective is to, like you said, housekeep those areas by burning back excessive fuels that, if unmanaged and unmaintained by us or other individuals, would cause and could cause larger wildfires, which if you look through a lot of forests in the state of Connecticut, there's a lot of vine growth and species that are growing very tightly together. With us managing it in this manner, we're able to quickly regenerate the soil with the charcoal that occurs from the ash and everything, and changes that compound of the soil and manage it nicely and quickly with limited staff and limited resources. We're managing it with fire that is limiting the use of equipment and having personnel essentially learn from these fires as well and train.
I was going to say that must be a good training exercise because it is a controlled situation. Like you said, I mean, although it is still fire, you're still treating that situation, I'm guessing, exactly the same as if it were so like a wildfire.
We're basically creating pinch points and monitoring. What it does is allow individuals, and I believe the last one we just did, the individuals were able to learn and understand how burning in strip fires was controlling it, back burning from where the wind was blowing. And we had, I think it was 5 or 6 brand new individuals who really never seen fire before. So this allows them to understand the movement of fire in, it was a pine pitch stand area. And in future, when we request them to a wildfire that may occur, they can understand the movement of the fire and what will occur better.
Talk to us as well about obviously working with other states' agencies, because of course Connecticut, like many states, is bridged by other states as well. I'm guessing that you guys and girls obviously have conversations about possible cooperation, mutual aid, I guess, if something is on a state line.
Absolutely. We have the Northeast Compacts, which is agreements between the states within the Northeast for mutual aid, as well as into Quebec, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island. And we meet every year. We train together at meetings, generally up in Maine. That's a centralized location for us. We all come together, learn the same programs, and have those relationships to call them when needed. On a state-to-state basis, if something's right on the line, my counterpart in, say, Massachusetts is Dave Salino, great individual, very smart. Him and I, as well as our fire control officers on both sides of the state, will work together. And we essentially, our goal initially is to put out the fire and then figure out what we need to do after the fact, if it gets to the point of having to pay large sums for stuff. But mutual aid isn't an issue. If there's a problem in a state, we're going to send resources. And like last year, we had a problem and everybody around us sent resources. Couldn't have been happier with how that worked out. But we even have on a larger scale, the Eastern Area Coordinating Center out of Minnesota. That's how large our district federally goes. And we bring in resources through there and communicate through them. A lot of its tools, equipment, and personnel can come out through there as well.
Just give us a sense, if you would, Tom, as well. We see these pictures on television and they are terrifying just to watch from afar. How quick can a fire not only take hold, but basically spread? I appreciate it's down to certain weather conditions as well, but just how fast can this all happen?
Oh, if everything lines up, you could be seeing 100 acres burn within a couple hours, if not faster. Again, like you just said, it is entirely based on the weather. Topography plays a huge role into it. If we get out in the northwest area with a lot of the rolling hills that the wind blows up through there, it's absolutely possible that it could move very quickly. And then you add that factor of the urban interface in there with houses and sheds, and everybody knows you mow a lawn, you have gasoline everywhere, you have propane for your grills. Those items can continue to feed that fire and just make it grow larger, which is why another item that we're trying to get out there is the Firewise, is to make sure that you have protectable space at least 30 feet around your house and other structures, which is removing a lot of the leaves, twigs, keeping your grass green in those areas if possible, and limbing up trees to a certain, I believe it's 13 feet. We'll just say limbing up trees to help limit those ladder fuels for creating crown fires as well and protecting. Because what firefighters are going to do on these fast moving larger fires is they're going to go, if it is in that urban interface, they're going to go house to house, say you need to evacuate. If everybody's evacuate, they put a mark on the front door to allow that it's been checked, and they moved on to the next one. And if they can defend the property, they absolutely will. But life safety is always the first item that we focus on.
It's been great talking to you. Thank you for taking the time to explain all of this very important information that we should all be taking heed of. What final message do you want to leave with people listening to this, as I say, as we enter, obviously, this season, which I believe is mid-March until around about May-ish? Just give us that final sort of like message to people out there about if they come across a brush fire.
Yeah, final message. Thank you to everybody in the state of Connecticut and the media for getting all this information out there and listening to it. Thank you to everybody who's being fire smart, fire wise, and putting out their fires and containing them. If you do see a wildfire or an uncontrolled brush fire unattended, notify through 911 your fire department immediately, and they'll come out and hopefully contain it. See something, say something. Communication about dangerous fires is very important, and we'd like to know about it as soon as possible. And again, just thank you to everybody that is playing a role in preventing these larger fires.
Tom Trask, Forest Protection Supervisor with Connecticut Deep, thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
I'm the threat that's already inside the house. I can't be scared away or negotiated with. You can't call the cops on me. You can't even see me. I'm the threat of family fire, and as long as your guns aren't stored securely, I'll be there. Protect your family. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by Brady and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. After a recent National Day of Action, some Connecticut residents are asking lawmakers to do more to defend the state from President Trump's administration's budget cuts. Edwin J. Vieira from the Connecticut News Service reports.
Thousands of people statewide protested federal actions like cutting $150 million from Connecticut's Department of Public Health and the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. This funding was to be used for services like disease outbreak surveillance, newborn screenings, and childhood immunizations. Carolina Bortoletto with the Husky for Immigrants Coalition says lawmakers must defend Connecticut through uncertain times.
We need our legislators to stand firm and find ways to keep up the services and keep up the programs that regular folks in our state rely on.
Future protests are being considered, but Bortoletto notes groups are focusing on state legislation to ensure protections, along with examining how the state could supplement funding for programs facing federal cuts. She says her organization wants to see a bill to protect immigrants from mass deportations. HB 7212 strengthens the Trust Act, Connecticut's immigration law, and was met with overwhelming support at a public hearing, but it's still in committee. I'm Edwin J. Vieira.
An inmate with ALS and opiate withdrawal who died in 2022, less than 24 hours of arriving at Bridgeport Corrections Center, did so because of neglect, according to a report from Disability Rights Connecticut. The agency, which is Connecticut's federally mandated protection and advocacy system, says their investigation took 31 months after the death of the inmate they are calling John Doe, and revealed numerous federal, state, and Department of Corrections policy violations by 3 nurses and several correction staff staff members. Rachel Mirsky is an attorney with DRCT and led the almost 3-year-long investigation and explained why it took so long.
We ask for everything related to the incident and the individual, in this case, the John Doe. We find that we don't get everything that we ask for, which is, again, a combination of obstruction, not knowing where things are located, having to pull things from different locations or other agencies. So it's a combination of asking for something, discovering something is missing, asking and saying, you didn't provide that information that we requested under federal law. We need this thing. We know it exists. Please provide it.
The report states 3 nurses and 5 correctional staff falsified records to show they had undertaken mandated checks on the inmate, but didn't and failed to provide life-saving CPR immediately, ultimately contributing to his death. Mirsky said those involved violated policy as well as broke the law.
Criminal charges have not been considered. I can say that internally with the DOC, their response was to consider disciplinary action as it related to those individuals' employment, not criminal activity, but just an administrative decision. And that's what we know. One was fired and there was some disciplinary action taken. One person is still pending as to what that disciplinary action will be as of April of 2025.
The nurses involved come under the Department of Public Health, who told Connecticut East in a statement that state law prohibits them from discussing the matter, saying they neither confirm or deny the existence of any potential investigation. The Department of Corrections also sent a statement saying that their leadership was currently reviewing the recently released report's findings. Eastern Connecticut non-profit Thames Valley Council for Community Action, TVCCA, has launched the state's second family bridge program in the city of Norwich. The program, which is funded by the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood, helps provide at-home support services free of charge to families of newly born children in the first few weeks and months after birth. Beth Bai is the commissioner of the Office of Early Childhood and said services like these really do make a difference.
What we know is that there are real inequities in birth outcomes and maternal health and child outcomes based on socioeconomic status and race, and that those were made worse during the COVID crisis. It is a particularly vulnerable time for parents when the baby is first born, and a particularly vulnerable time for that baby. So it is a time when we can get in there and support parents and children's physical health and mental health.
The new service provides up to 3 home visits by registered nurses to help parents transition from hospital to home with their newly born child and receive ongoing support services. Joshua Kelly is the CEO of TVCCA and said the new in-home service is free and up and running already in the area.
We are not asking individuals to prove that they are worth having supports in their household for their children and as new parents. We are already in progress. We're 2 months into this program. We have 33 community health worker referrals that have already occurred. 14 of our families have already connected with in-home visit. 11 currently prenatal connections that we are currently working towards that will ultimately receive some of these in-home visits.
Kelly says the Family Bridge program can also help reduce visits to local emergency rooms by up to 52% by concerned parents. And the Family Bridge program that was started in the city of Bridgeport in 2024 and has so far provided help and services to just over 1,000 families in that area. And the US Navy welcomed their newest nuclear submarine into service recently as the USS Iowa, the 24th Virginia-class fast attack submarine, was commissioned at the Naval Submarine Base in New London. The event included speakers, including the submarine's captain and the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan. Iowa is the 4th Navy vessel to be named after the state and the first to be a submarine. Secretary Phelan emphasized the firepower the submarine carries and how it fits into naval strategy in the modern era, saying that it's not just about strength, but also about deterrence. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.